Look, I know it's Kent State week, but I think it's safe to say we can all look ahead to that Penn State Illinois matchup. And this is an interesting one because this isn't your traditional Bret Bielema type of team.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is a bonus Locked On crossover for Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On Illini. I'm Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Sonny Verma of Locked On Illini, also the host of the Big Ten Show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Sonny, Penn State's in a prime position to look ahead truly because Kent State might be the worst team in all of FBS, at least a bottom five team. So this is a prime look ahead spot where there's not going to be the consequences if you look past this opponent. That's just where Kent State is. So I thought it was a good idea to get an early perspective on what Illinois is, because that could be a top 25 matchup in prime time at Beaver Stadium around 1 week from when we're recording this. Illinois, when I saw that they snuck into the top 25, I was a little bit surprised here.
I wouldn't say surprised.
Okay.
Some folks have mentioned that, but the offense has played decently well, but the defense has been a complete surprise on this team. We're averaging less than 9 points allowed on the season, which is funny because the defense was a big question mark coming into the season. In my own season preview, I talked about how the season would go, how the defense goes, because I was super confident about our skill players, our offensive line. I thought we could be one of the leading scorers in the Big Ten this season. But it turns out, at least through the first 3 games, it's the defense carrying us. And as for that top 25 ranking, I guess it's kind of about how you judge it, right? Like, Nebraska's gotten a lot of hype this season. Of course, we knew they would. A lot of people projected them to start 6-0 or 7-0. But you take a look at the teams that they've beat, putting them on a neutral field, Kansas and Colorado, I think Kansas would still be favored over Colorado. So when you talk about, opponents being beaten, if Nebraska's at 22, I don't think Illinois should be too far behind.
Okay, so you think that Illinois is a legitimate top 25 team? Because the way I'm looking at this, that Kansas win is a quality victory. That's a non-conference team, and you beat a Kansas team that has, at least admirable talent. Jalen Daniels is a very good quarterback. And then Devin Neal is an NFL running back. He will play on Sundays. But I know all too well how Andy Kotelnicki had an impact on that offense. He's now at Penn State, and he's not there. And then that Kansas offense is clearly not the same, at least through the first 3 games. And that was interesting to me because you say Illinois can be a really good scoring offense, and Kansas at least still has elements of what Andy Kotelnicki's system was a season ago with the talent to back it up relative to Kansas, of course. And that was a 23-17 game. So when I look at that from 1,000 feet away, why didn't Illinois score more points in that game? Was that because Illinois' defense was just that good? I liken it to Florida State to an extent because I think Florida State is a dumpster fire. I'm not saying Kansas is a dumpster fire, but were they really a top 25 team? I kind of feel like Illinois is riding the benefit of Kansas just happening to be in the AP.
Fair enough. If you take a look at Illinois' schedule for the next 4 out of 5 weeks, we play ranked teams. And that's going to humble the Illini a little bit, and we're going to be falling out of that top 25. But based strictly on resume, I guess it's all about how you rank the top 25. Do you rank it based on pure talent? Well, then Illinois is not going to be in the top 25. But they had a shutout in the first game. They had a dominating 30-9 win over Central Michigan, and a big victory over a team that boat raced them last year. So, these are notable victories. And as I mentioned, the defense has been fantastic. That offense, what I mentioned earlier, was in the preseason, it looked like it was going to be fantastic. Our skill players are some of the best in the conference. I genuinely believe that. Outside maybe 2 or 3 teams, I don't think anyone has a receiving set like Patrick Bryant and Zachary Franklin. Luke Altmaier has become a very good quarterback this year. He is yet to throw an interception. And we recall last year in the same game between Illinois and Penn State, Luke had 4 interceptions just in that first game. It seems like he's really grown from that experience. What I didn't take into account was the offensive line regressing. Our two tackles, who are new transfers in, they've played fantastic. But our center, our guards, they're kind of undersized, which is not normal for a Bret Bielema team. And I don't know if it's communication issues or whatnot, but they've kind of struggled against other opposing defensive lines, which is what makes me a little hesitant and fearful for Friday night's game against Nebraska.
So you don't look at that Kansas game where Kansas's defense was the reason why the Jayhawks weren't more successful a season ago, because Andy Kotelnicki did so many things well with that offense, in the fact that he did everything to carry Kansas's defense, and it still didn't work out. That's just not a good group. You can make an argument that it's a bad group. It's certainly below average. And Illinois, with an offense that you thought was improved and has really a really good set of weapons, only put up 23 points against them. How do you look at that?
Really, again, it's the offensive line from the second and third periods which struggled. If you take a look at our first drive from that series, we drove down the field. And then the fourth quarter, all of a sudden, Barry Lunny Jr., our offensive coordinator, kind of opened things up a little bit. We got a little bit more aggressive. Luke made the tough throws to Patrick Bryant and Zachary Franklin, and we were able to, put up the 23. But no real explanation. We'll see what happens in this Nebraska game. That's when I think it's going to be a real litmus test, because that's going to be the first tough
That's a really good defense
that we're going to be playing this year. You're talking about one of the 3 or 4 best defenses in the conference. So I think I'm not judging too much, because we seemed kind of like we neutered our offense against Kansas. And I don't know if it's because our defense was playing so well, but we do have offensive line issues. And I think right now that's the glaring issue for the season moving forward.
Well, I can sit here and agree with you that it will be a reality check, because Penn State doesn't have its hands full, but Illinois certainly should not be looking past that Friday night matchup against Nebraska, which will be, depending on when you watch this, just in a matter of 24 hours. And that's a good one. That's a top 25 matchup between Nebraska and Illinois. So we will all get a better idea of what Illinois brings to the table this season. However, for Penn State fans, I think there's going to be some, anyway, a little bit of a misconception that Illinois is still your traditional ground and pound 7-8 offensive lineman, comparable to that 2021 9-overtime game. But we're here to tell you that that's not the case. How is Illinois going to game plan for Penn State, and vice versa? We'll talk about that on the other side of this break. And today's bonus episode is brought to you by Roy. Hey, Nittany Lion fans, have you heard about Roy? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fan, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you have the ability to help shape rosters, retain talent, keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. Roy is changing the NIL game for fans. And one of the biggest concerns is going to be, are these contributions risky? What's going to happen with what I what I pay towards my favorite athletes? Well, there are no risk contributions with Roy. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan's support. If not, then the money is returned to the fan. You can get the Roy app for iOS or Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Use our referral code LOCKEDON. That is code LOCKEDON for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for more details. No purchase necessary and void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game with Roy. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. You got to download the Game Time app, because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time has just released a new feature called Game Time Picks, and that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on incredible tickets, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And let's look at tickets available for Penn State versus Illinois, shall we? That's a primetime matchup in Beaver Stadium the following Saturday, and it already has the top deal sorted for me on Game Time. You can get 2 tickets on the Penn State sideline around the 20-30 yard line for $162 a piece. That is all in pricing, so the fees are not hidden at checkout. That is all in upfront pricing. And if you're looking for the cheapest deal for tickets, you can get 2 tickets in the South Upper Deck end zone for $60 a piece. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So let's address that misconception about how Illinois is not this ground and pound physical team. They are a spread offense. Sonny, you already mentioned that they might have one of the best wide receiver duos in the entirety of the Big Ten Conference. So for anybody that thinks that Illinois is going to march in here, now Bret Bielema at his core is that, yes, that ground and pound coach. He has a long history in the Big Ten where it worked at Wisconsin and then had done it, implemented it at Illinois briefly. But they've moved away from that because I think it just benefits the skill set of Luke Altmaier a little more, who has dual threat capabilities. He is talent. I don't think we've seen the best of his true top potential. But for right now, what it is, it's a spread offense. They have really good wide receivers. Luke Altmaier is better. So don't expect Illinois to roll out the 7-8 offensive linemen again against Penn State in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I'm sure Bret would still like that ground and pound, with the offensive line. And because we have the running backs to do it. We have Caden Fagan. If you recall, we struggled opening the season last year, but it's because we had offensive line issues, and we really didn't have a running back who took the reins until Caden Fagan. Last year, a true freshman came in, 6'3", 250 pounds, a complete bowling ball. Like, this guy, once he gets his stride going, he's almost impossible to take down and tackle. But when you're 6'3" and 250 pounds, it's hard. Basically, he runs to a spot, and if that spot's not there, all of a sudden it's hard for him to really get that space that he's looking for. And we've struggled, as I mentioned, with our offensive line. So he hasn't had the numbers that we kind of predicted. One of my bold predictions this year would be that he'd be on the All Big Ten team as one of our running backs, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. But we have a lot of running back behind him. We have he's the Thunder, and Aiden Lofbury is the Lightning. He's much faster, a little quicker. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. We also have Josh McCray, who's, I believe, in his third or fourth year with Illinois. His freshman year, he was fantastic, and I thought he was going to be the next in line of the great Bielema running backs. But unfortunately, for the last couple of years, he's had to deal with some injuries. And the guy to look out for is true freshman 4-star Khalil Valentine. Now, every time he's been brought in to play, he's made moves, and arguably he's probably had the best rushing lines that we've had in the first 3 games at least. He is what Caden Fagan isn't. He's a little smaller, but he's more natural instinct, and he's able to juke here and there. If a hole's not there, he can quickly move in another direction, and he's got that type of quickness. So the running back room is arguably our most talented room that we have on this team. They just haven't been able to be fully utilized just because of the struggles that we're having in the middle of our offensive line. Our wide receivers, as you mentioned, Patrick Bryant is, I think, second or third in the conference in receiving and receiving touchdowns. Zachary Franklin is one of the all-time, I believe he's the leading returning wide receiver in college yardage.
Okay.
So Patrick Bryant's actually, I want to mention him real quick, as I did. He is the story that you love as an Illinois fan. A kid who is underrated, comes in his first year, rarely plays. Second year does special teams. Third year, last year, he was like the third or fourth guy. He's just a guy who's worked his butt off and elevated his role to the point where now, if Zachary Franklin wasn't on this team, I was initially nervous that he could or could not be a true number one wide receiver. But this year, he absolutely has been. And that's been really nice to see. And to round it all up, Luke Altmaier, he was kind of the big X factor. There was a lot of national perception last year that he lost his job to John Paddock at the end of the year, when truly that wasn't the case. He started off the season struggling. I think he had 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in his first 4 games, and ultimately ended, I think, second in the conference in interceptions. But His last 6 games, he had 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He really was starting to turn things around. It just so happens in the second to last series against Minnesota, he got hurt. John Paddock came in, threw a touchdown to Isaiah Williams to win the game. Luke Altmaier was not able to play the following game against Indiana, and then John Paddock threw for 530 yards. And it's hard to bench a quarterback who just threw for 530 yards and broke university records. So the national perception on Luke was a little lower than I think the Illini fan base. We've all been a little excited, but I mean, he's performed beyond what I expected of him as well. Because as I said, 6 touchdowns, at least as of today, 0 interceptions. He can make the throw now that he's trusting his wide receivers. That was kind of his issue last year. You never knew whether he was going to. He was a little hesitant because it was his first full year as a starter. So he played like it at sometimes, but I think through the coaching he's mentioned of John Paddock, he's learned to just trust his instinct. He knows he's got playmakers on the outside, so just throw a ball where they can catch it, and more often than not, they bring it down. And he's a guy who can win it with his legs as well, as you mentioned. At the beginning of last season, he was not only our best passer, but he was our best rusher just because we couldn't figure out the whole running back situation. So I would never call Luke Altmaier a superstar quarterback, right, but I genuinely do think he's a good quarterback. And if I were to come up with a quarterback rankings right now, I think he's genuinely one of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the conference.
Yeah, I think Luke Altmaier had a lot of potential going into college football when he was being recruited. Didn't work out at Ole Miss, and hey, he's landed in Illinois, and at least he's improving, so that's good for the Fighting Illini. Again, a tough matchup where it is going to be a reality check against Nebraska. Sonny, to wrap it up here briefly in this bonus episode, from what it sounds like based on our discourse here, I'm anticipating a bit of a shootout when it comes to Beaver Stadium. I think that the Nebraska game will kind of give that off perception just because Nebraska's defense is truly you said top 5. I think top 10 is just appropriate. But if you're being a little generous, I don't disagree to say that Nebraska isn't one of the top 5 defenses in the country. Now, Andy Kotelnicki, who scored a lot of points at Kansas against Illinois, is now at Penn State, so he knows how the defense operates and what works. Drew Aller is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten Conference. I think he deserves a lot more respect in the country. He's still not getting it. People are just like, okay, he's getting better, but he's still not. We wouldn't put him in our top 20 quarterbacks. I think that's just absolutely disrespectful. And the defense, KJ Winston is out what is described now as long-term, so we truly don't. He's not going to be available for the Illinois game. I know that much. So with question marks around Penn State's defense, question marks still around Illinois' defense, I should say, that makes for 2 offenses going back and forth where it could be a shootout.
It could be. We'll see. It's one of those situations where the defense has actually scored a lot of our points this year. The corner, at least the secondary. Xavier Scott is having a completely fantastic season this year. He's got 3 interceptions, I believe, 1 for a returning touchdown. Miles Scott, not related, has a couple of interceptions himself. One of the big reasons that we struggled out of the gate defensively last year was Matthew Bailey. Matthew Bailey actually came back for the Penn State game last year, but he was injured in his first series. And he was supposed to be a captain on the defensive side. So he didn't get any playing time. And this year he has been playing, and he's played very well. And so the secondary, I think the key for Illinois, when they go up against teams that are clearly more talented than them, is they've got to try to hold on to the ball and take the ball as often as they can. So I know Drew Aller, and again, I'm higher on him than most. He doesn't make many mistakes, but it's going to be one of those where one of our guys in the secondary who, like our ball hawks, are going to have to make a play or two, I think. And truthfully, speaking realistically as an Illinois fan, my hope is that they're figuring something out on the offensive line Friday night against Nebraska. And so we can kind of maybe avoid the shootout and hold on to the ball as much as we can against Penn State and try to take advantage of an opportunistic defense.
He is Sonny Verma of Locked On Illini. I'm Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions. A crossover bonus episode leading up to the what is going to be a primetime showdown between Penn State and Illinois in just a week's time. All of our platforms will be linked down in the description. Sonny, thanks so much for the time being able to do this crossover episode here.
Zach, I appreciate you having me.